So the Football Manager 2019 full release is almost upon us. The beta's been running for about a week. Many people have started games already. Many people are planning their games and talking about what saves they're going to play. But before you do that, just take a moment and listen to this video. I'm going to make the case for why you should be managing obscure clubs in Football Manager 2019. Here you can see a collection of some of the clubs I've managed over the last 10 years or so of the game. Probably you're not familiar with many of them, and that wouldn't surprise me. Now, my history with Football Manager and Championship Manager goes back quite a long way. I don't really... I know I did play one of the 1990 versions of the game. I don't really remember it that well, and I played on and off while it was still called Championship Manager. It's only really from Football Manager 2006 onwards that I started to have these memorable saves, and there's a reason for that. Before that point, I would always go for either my favourite team, Manchester United, for my sins, or one of the other big teams at the time, Newcastle, Liverpool, Barcelona, so on. I used to get bored with the game quite quickly. I'd play for maybe 5 or 6 seasons, and then I'd wait for the new version to come out. About 12 years ago now, I guess, I got into the SI forums and I started to find out about these challenges, and that's how I started to get into some of these obscure clubs here. I mean, just to quickly run you through it, you've got Kamel Baslami there. I've probably just murdered the pronunciation. The Czech team, famous for being the team where Peter Cech started his career. I took them from the bottom of the Czech second division all the way to becoming champions of Europe as part of one of the small to big club challenges. That was a Gundo European challenge. I later repeated that feat with Yalavaspor, my first big Turkish save. I did it in Mexico with Altamira FC, took them right up to be the dominant force in Latin American football. I later got into journeyman saves, where I'd start unemployed as a Sunday League footballer and travel around the world trying to build up my career. There was one year I started with Tai Po here in Hong Kong, and then moved on to Olimpo in Argentina, made my way to Toronto. From there I eventually ended up at Sevilla and Manchester United in Europe. One of my more recent journeyman saves, I took in Suwon and Amazulu, Perth Glory. I've spent some time in Colombia as well at Once Caldas, and just building up these careers. And I've really had fun with it. I think I probably wouldn't still be playing the game today if I just continued playing with the big teams. So I'm going to make the case now for why you should be managing obscure teams in Football Manager. So the first thing, as I've kind of already talked about, reviving your love for the game. Maybe you kind of started to feel Football Manager's got a bit stale, you're getting a bit bored with it, you're not sure if you're going to bother with Football Manager 2019 or not. If it's the case that you always manage one of the big teams, or you always manage your favourite team or your local team, think about casting the net a bit wider. Get out of England if that's where you generally play, or get out of Europe. Choose some obscure Malaysian team, or choose one of the weaker Chilean teams, or go and manage in South Africa or India for a while. Build up your career there from the very bottom. What you will find if you do this brings me on to the second point here, increasing your footballing knowledge. Now, I mean this in two ways, both just in terms of my general knowledge about the game. I've learned so much from managing these teams about different competitions, especially the continental competitions, and I've learned a lot about these different teams around the world. I mean, you find that most of these teams have a story behind them. There's something in their history that makes them interesting, and as you kind of research more about them, learn more about them, pay more attention to them in real life, I think it just increases your knowledge and your enjoyment of football in general. Also, your knowledge of the game. Bringing me on to the third point, that when you're playing with some of these teams, when I played with Tai Po in Hong Kong, I mean, it meant I had to completely adapt my idea of what a good player was. There were no players here where you say, oof, he's only got 12 for finishing, he'll be no good up front. It was like, wow, this guy's got a 9 for finishing, he's going to be our number 1 striker. And just developing tactics that allow you to be successful with these very limited players, and especially when you get to the point where you're taking these teams into continental competition. I think it really helps you develop a good tactic, so you're not just relying on super skillful players who can kind of adapt to any tactic you give them. You've got to go back to basics and build it up. It also stretches your scouting skills. You've really got to operate with a much more limited pool of players with some of these teams. You've got to operate with limited transfer and wage budgets in some cases. You can't just go for the biggest players available. So it really helps you get into the scouting system, picking the right scouts, getting the right kind of network together, looking at ways you can increase your club's scouting knowledge, affiliating with other teams, with bigger teams and smaller teams, and just taking advantage of all those aspects of the game that you might not really pay attention to when you're managing Chelsea or when you're in charge of PSG. Analysing those scout reports, making judgments, because of course you've got to remember at that kind of level, your scouts maybe only have a 7 or an 8 for judging player ability. And you've got to learn how to spot the gems amongst the not gem stuff. And the main thing I love about managing in these obscure nations is the fact that you get to script your own story. You get to build things up. I love the idea that you start out as a Sunday League reputation manager, possibly with no coaching badges, maybe an amateur or semi-professional team, and you're trying to build your way up from there. I just find a much greater sense of achievement having taken Kemal Balsani to the Czech League title than taking Sparta Prague to the Czech League title. Getting that achievement of winning the Champions League with Yalova. It's a much bigger achievement than winning it with Galatasaray. That would still be an achievement, because it's never happened before, but taking this team from a town of 70,000 people and turning them into the champions of Europe was quite something. There's a whole journeyman aspect that you start out at a club like Tai Po in Hong Kong, and then over time you work your way up through the divisions in Argentina. You go to the MLS and you take over Toronto and turn them into a dominant force in North American football, and you even take them to the final of the Club World Cup. And then you move on to Europe, feeling that you've earned your place at the top table. Winning the Asian Champions League with Perth Glory, that was another success. And I brought over a player that I'd had at Suwon, the wonderfully named Lee Ki Wong, who was our star winger in that team. And I remember all of these things much more than I remember playing with Newcastle in Football Manager 2005 or Championship Manager 4, whenever it was. Really, I think, you've got this huge game, huge database of players, thousands of clubs from around the world. You've got to just use it, try something different. Go for one of those challenges. Go for one of the small club to big club challenges where you choose a team that's been newly promoted into the bottom level of a Nations League system and try to take them to that country's league title and then on to continental glory. I mean, that can be done in any country in the game. Well, except for the ones that don't have a relegation system like the MLS. But you can always use the bottom team and just build them up from there. Again, it's just that sense of pride and achievement and building a story around the club. Also, the journeyman option is a great way to go about it, moving around, building it up from one of the tiniest clubs in the world up to one of the biggest. That's my case made. Those are my reasons why you should consider managing a lesser known club in Football Manager 2019. If you've got any comments to add about your reasons for trying more obscure clubs, please share them down below. If you've got a club in mind that you're going to try, share it down below. If you're not sure about a club, watch out for the second part of this video, because that's going to talk about how you go about choosing a club you've never heard of before as your Football Manager team and the various options we've got for that. If you think, what are you talking about? There's nothing wrong. I always enjoy managing one of the big European nations. Then, please let me know about it and tell me about your case. But for now, I'm Dodgy Gamer. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Tap that notification bell to learn about all my videos as soon as they go live. Share this on social media. Leave those comments. I'm Dodgy Gamer. See you again soon.